Théun Mares, you're known as a man of knowledge, a light bringer, a friend of humanity, and as an author of 6 books, can you summarize the main purpose of your current work?
If I were to summarize the main purpose of my work, then it is really what I like to think of as bringing humanity its true heritage as man. What do I mean by its true heritage? For me, that is really knowledge about self. In other words, who are we? We all seem to think that we know who we are, but who are we really? What is the purpose of our lives, or is it really just about earning a living, having a family, watching the kids grow up and then die? Or is there a greater purpose to our lives? And then thirdly, and that for me is the most important of all, is if I am on this planet, and if I am alive, surely there must be something in it for me as well. The way I've got to know this through my own life's experiences is, what can I learn? How can I as a person really grow? And that for me is what I like to call the heritage of man. And that is really what all of my work is centered around. Bringing humanity the answers to those 3 most fundamental questions.
So is that what you feel is your purpose in this lifetime?
Yes, very much so. Because when I look at people around me, people generally speaking, most people, they're always seeking for something which will bring them a sense of happiness and a sense of fulfillment. Yet they so seldom find it. And what I've learned, again through my own experience, is because although they know they're searching, they don't really know what it is that they're searching for.
You're known as a light bringer. What is this? What does that mean?
Light bringer is a very difficult question to answer. And I suppose also nowadays it has so many different connotations because it's also known as the Bodhisattva. And because of people's understanding of the Eastern religions, this has become somewhat, let us just say, confused. But for me, a light bringer is exactly what the word says. It's bringing light. And if you think of what I said earlier about humanity's heritage, for me, that is shedding light on our purpose upon the physical plane as human beings. So really, a light bringer is someone who sheds light in the dark areas of our lives, the areas which we don't understand.
You speak about your own experience in your lifetime. How did you find this out, that this was your role, that this was your purpose at this time?
Elizabeth, as long as I can remember, ever since I was a tiny, tiny child, I might just add here that I grew up very much alone, in that although I have 2 sisters, both my sisters are very much older than myself. So as I was growing up, I grew up very much as a lone child because, first of all, they were at boarding school, and then by the time I was older, they were already married and they'd left home. So really, my sense of life, I might also add that my father was a gold miner, which meant that we really lived out in the wilderness. So I didn't really have friends that I could play with. And especially in the early days of my childhood, I grew up very much with nothing but the wild animals around me, the birds, and whoever happened to come occasionally to visit. So really, ever since I was a small child, playing outside in nature, I used to have experiences which I felt surely everybody must have. But what was quite a shock for me was when I first started to go to school and I started to mix with other people. And I realized, first of all, that other children didn't think the same way as I do, and they didn't approach life in the same way as I did. To start with, I first started to think that maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was just misguided. Maybe I had just grown up all alone and I'd been alone for too long. But gradually but surely I started to interact a little bit more with people. And I realized, no, it's not necessarily that I'm wrong, because often when I expressed how I saw things or how I experienced things, people would say, gosh, where did you learn that from? So I started to look a little bit more deeply as I grew older, and I started to realize that in fact we're all different. Different people, each and every person has their own way of thinking about life. And when I say about life, I mean our daily experiences. I also realized that people feel differently about their experiences. And then as I grew older still, and I started to understand concepts such as perception, I started to realize this is really all about perception. So in other words, how people react to their lives or how they respond to their lives, how they feel about their lives. And again, I want to stress about their daily experiences. It's how they perceive, it's how they think and how they feel, and therefore how they either respond or they react. And this is really how I started off. So when I speak about my experience, yes, it was as fundamental as that. It was learning from a very early age that there is something like perception, and how perception actually influences our whole existence upon the physical plane.
Would you describe yourself as a teacher?
Teacher is a very big word, but what does it really mean to teach? Of course, in the work that I do, I end up giving a lot of guidance. People come to me with all sorts of questions, with all sorts of problems, and I give them guidance. But is that really teaching? For me, teaching, the way I understand teaching, is when I sit you down and I tell you, look, this is how life works, and this is what you must do, and this is what you must not do. For me, that is teaching. But I don't see myself as a teacher in that respect. I like to see myself more as a friend of humanity, or if you like, as a guide.